We are delighted that this week's episode is sponsored by the Animal Guys, who tour the UK and Europe educating audiences about all creatures, great and small.
Having just completed a sellout theatre tour, what makes the Animal Guys different is they've developed an entire show that involves no live animals.
They truly believe in learning through laughter and educating families today so that we can save the animals of tomorrow.
To find out more and for tickets to their tour, just Google The Animal Guys.
There are so many diets out there, but the one thing that they all seem to have in common is that none seem to be able to work long term. Diets can be great, just to get you started on that weight loss track, but they're not sustainable long term. And because of that, it can make you really feel like you're a failure.
And the reason why they're not sustainable long term is because you create habits around eating, and then suddenly it's like, well, you can't have those foods anymore. You've got to have these foods. And that's why you have this internal battle. But the main way to lose weight is to ask yourself, why did you put weight on in the first place? And pretty much all the time there is a trauma behind you putting weight on.
Yeah,
and that's what you need to look for.
And our guest today is brilliant because they are such a great example of our philosophy that overeating is a symptom. It's not a choice. And this lady has been on lots of diets as well and not been able to sustain them. But in the last year, she has managed to lose almost 5 stone. That's like 5 stone in a year. So we thought she'd be a great guest to share how did she manage it and does she feel it's sustainable? So welcome, Kat.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so lovely to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. So tell us, so we met 12 months ago. You came along to one of our workshops. We'd never met you before then. So give us a bit of background. Why did you come to our workshop?
So I came to your workshop because I just absolutely hated myself. I didn't come specifically to lose weight. I just was in despair, and it was my final attempt to try and get some help. I'd had therapy. I'd had cognitive behavioural therapy, hypnotherapy, counselling, and I just, no matter what happened, I was in this cycle of just hating myself. My self-esteem was on the floor. And I spoke to Nick, and I couldn't even make eye contact with Nick at the time. And I just said to him, I hate myself. And your first question to me was, who's made you hate yourself? And I missed the point of the question because I just said me, because I'm so fat and I can't lose weight, and everything I do, I just can't lose weight. And you said, but who's made you feel like that? And I was like, me, because I can't lose weight. I'm useless. I'm fat. I'm greedy. And you said, have you always had a problem with your weight? And I said, no, it's like since I was in my early 20s. I know why. I've dealt with that. And I think you probably thought, with all due respect, I don't think you have dealt with it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And you said, I don't think you have dealt with it. And I told you that when I was in my early 20s, I was attacked by a stranger. And at that point, I then gained over 4 stone very quickly within about 6 months. And for the last nearly 20 years, I've been trying to lose that weight unsuccessfully, and I've done every diet.
So that was my question. So you've tried loads of different diets and that you couldn't sustain that didn't work.
I was amazing at losing a stone or a stone and a half. I think I lost the same stone and gained the same stone 10, 12 times over those years. But every diet I did came from a place of punishment, of hating myself.
Yeah.
And I was trying to hate myself into a version of myself that I could like.
But it's interesting that when we had that conversation, and I remember, and you said, well, me, that you're so caught up in what has happened over the years that you've lost sight of actually what did happen, and you get caught up in the symptoms as opposed to the cause. And that's why that you, because of what happened, because you got attacked, and because you then try and, not your fault, but take responsibility of that, and you start hating yourself, and then you start putting weight on, and which although makes you feel better in the moment, doesn't in the long term. And then when you go on the diet and you start losing weight and you've got this conflict of feeling better because you know you're achieving something, but then also not feeling great because you want to make yourself unattractive.
And question, so you didn't have any, until being attacked, you had no issues around weight?
No, I was naturally small, petite, size 8 to 10, never been on a diet, just never really thought about it. And then the weight just came on.
And then you got attacked. Did you start eating, like, were you aware of it, or did it just happen?
It just happened. It wasn't something I was aware of doing. And then I was suddenly a size 16 to 18, wanted to lose weight. But then I would lose a stone and people would start saying, oh, you've lost weight, you look good. And it's like, bam, the weight went back on.
Had you ever put those two things together, that your weight gain was a consequence of having been attacked?
No.
Really?
Never. Until Nick said to me, you do realise that you're trying to keep yourself safe by being bigger.
Yeah.
And then you said to me, before the attack, when you were smaller, were you safe? And I was like, yes. And you could have knocked me over then, because that was when I thought, I've had this false belief all that time. I didn't even know I had that belief.
Yeah.
But.
And so the belief was being bigger makes you unattractive, because when you would lose the stones, the one stone, and then someone said, oh, you look great, immediately now I'm starting to look attractive again and I don't want that, so I need to put the weight back on. Am I right?
You are right, yeah. And I had no idea that was what was going on. But as soon as you said that, it was like, oh, never thought of it like that.
Yeah, it's quite, for Nick and I and Liv, who's now sort of joined the therapy family, I think we get quite frustrated that we see so many people that hate themselves, that they try to lose weight, they can't lose weight, they feel they're a failure because they can't lose weight. And what people don't seem to understand is that they're trying to treat the symptom, and the symptom is the overeating, but that is not the issue. The issue is, the question, why are you overeating? And for so many people, the overeating comes from some sort of a trauma, like yourself, Kat. Overeating can be because you're trying to protect yourself. If I'm big, I'll be safe. If I'm big, I won't get bullied. It can also be a form of self-harm. I hate myself, so I don't deserve to look good and feel good. It can be a form of self-medication. I need to numb the pain. I need to just get that serotonin and that sort of some feel-good hormones just to make myself feel a little bit better about myself. And this is where food comes in, because it gives us a quick hit of a feel-good hormone. And yet so many people, that are going on diets, are trying to restrict, and it makes them miserable. So in regards to yourself, you felt that you had dealt with your trauma, but had you?
So I was diagnosed with PTSD after the attack, and I had definitely had therapy that had worked with the symptoms of that. But no, I hadn't, because as Nick said, you need to let it go, and it wasn't your fault. And that was something I had never really come to terms with, because I was still blaming myself and hating myself and punishing myself. And as you said, you're just carrying on where they left off all those years ago.
And just to confirm, your punishment was based on the fact that you believe that you got attacked because you look good.
I blamed myself for what I was wearing, for how I looked. And it wasn't until you said, it wasn't because of you, it's because of who they were. And if it wasn't you that night, it would have been somebody else. And I know that now. And so that was the first part. And then I think realizing that it's okay to feel good about yourself, because like you said, I was using it as a form of self-punishment, self-abuse, really. Yes. And loving yourself and respecting yourself is a good thing. And I wasn't doing that. So
tell us about your journey. So you came along to one of our workshops. You obviously, we sort of deliver the workshop, and then in the breaks, everybody can come and sort of ask us a question. And you spoke to Nick. He highlighted to you that you were using, that you hadn't actually let go of that, and you were overeating to protect yourself. So you had the realization. It was kind of a light bulb moment for you. You realized that, yes, this is actually the cause of my overeating. So then what happened? You leave our workshop, and what happens next? Do you have to start thinking, oh, I'm not going to eat that, or what happens?
It was literally instant. So I got in the car and I already had snacks in the car for the way home because that's what my life was like. So I had chocolate. I was going to stop at McDonald's on the way home. And I got in the car and I thought, I just don't really fancy it. It wasn't me thinking, oh, I shouldn't eat that. I'm not going to eat that. I just didn't really want it. And then it's like something had shifted in my head. And actually, I started thinking, what makes me feel good and what do I want to eat that makes me feel good? And a lot of the time I was eating to the point of feeling sick and feeling ill and that I just didn't want to do that anymore to myself. I felt like I deserved better. Mm-hmm. So I haven't given up chocolate. I haven't given up anything, but I just started to be more mindful about what I was eating, how it was making me feel, and not, I think because I didn't have a need anymore to punish myself, I just stopped. Yeah. And I think people are being really kind now and they're saying, oh, you've lost so much weight, you look so different, how are you doing it? And I think it's almost frustrating for them when I say I haven't been on a diet, I haven't done a specific plan, I've just changed my relationship with food and loved myself more.
I was going to say, but that relationship with food has changed because the relationship with yourself has changed, hasn't it? So that's, I guess, what we're saying here. And another question. So we have a lot of people that come and speak to us and come and see us, and we help a lot of people to lose weight. And one thing that we hear quite often, and I've experienced it myself actually, is weight loss saboteurs. You might not have, but I'd be just really interested. And these weight loss saboteurs may not be sabotaging your weight loss out of malice, but it can be, you lose weight, that makes me feel bad about myself. You lose weight, that might mean that, that you'll go out with other friends and I might lose you. So have you experienced any of that?
I've been really lucky that no, I haven't. No, and I have got an amazing husband who's been with me when I was much smaller, been with me bigger. He's been with me every size in between. So no, and I feel really lucky that I have got that support, but I can imagine that if you're in a friendship like that or in a relationship like that, it could be difficult.
So let me ask you, obviously you highlighted before that when you lost that first stone, then something kicked in. What happened this time? Because you must have acknowledged when you got to I've lost my first stone. You must have acknowledged it. Yeah. How was that different?
I felt proud of myself this time. And actually, I think that's the other thing. I stopped saying to myself, I'm going to be happy when I'm this size, or I'm going to be happy when my thighs are this size, or I'm in a size 10. I just decided to accept myself as I was, which didn't mean I was just going to stay like that, but it meant that actually I'm going to enjoy every step of this process because it is a lifelong process, and my happiness doesn't matter on what I weigh at the end of it all. It's just I'm happy now. And I think so when people were saying to me, wow, you've lost, because I saw you guys 6 weeks later, I came back to another workshop.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, only because I'd been so in my head for the first part of the workshop before I spoke to Nick that I missed the morning of it really. So I thought I'd come back, and you recognised straight away. You went, you look so different. And I just said thank you because I felt really good, and I felt like it was a compliment.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, that like it's basically a battle for people in their own heads because they know they want to lose weight. They know that they are unhappy, like you said in your case, that you knew you didn't like the way you looked, you knew you were unhappy, you knew you're miserable. But it's this, and I feel for people because I think they get so angry with themselves and think, why can't I achieve this? Why can't I lose weight? And then it makes it even worse because they hate themselves even more because they blame themselves for not being able to do that. But what we're losing sight of is that they're battling with things that have happened in their past that are basically holding them back. So for every step forward they take, the past kind of drags them back. And I think that, with what Kat's saying there, that when she was able to deal with that past and cut that off, it allowed her to do what she wanted and allow her to make the decisions rather than something else that was in the background, if that makes sense.
You're absolutely right. And I think that what people overlook because they get so frustrated with themselves because I want to lose weight, but I just can't, and I lose a bit of weight and I put it back on, is looking for the positive intent because, ultimately, you're punishing yourself when your brain is doing the complete opposite. It's trying to protect you. So, it comes down to that with Kat, the protection was, if I lose weight, I'm putting myself in danger, right? That can't happen again. I can't risk being attacked again. So I need to keep this weight on to keep myself safe.
Positive intent is a really interesting thing that you've just brought up there, Nick, because I think that that's something we should all consider is, what is our positive intent for overeating? Because that'll give us a lot of answers. So for some people, it might be, I'm feeling lonely. So it just fills that void. For some people, it might be that, I felt that I didn't get rewarded, or I don't get rewarded much in my life. But when I was a kid, if I was good, I would get rewarded with food, and then you're unconsciously trying to rekindle those same feelings of how good it felt when you got rewarded. And a positive intent I had. So when I was a teenager, I would say that I was a very plump teenager, not so much child, but when I got into teenage years, and I did.
Can I just ask you a question there? Because a lot of people say that to us, saying that, but yeah, I was always a big child, I was always plump. But as you know, when we've asked people to bring photographs into us and we've looked, they never were.
Yeah.
Right. So how did that apply? I've never asked you that question.
Yeah. No. Interestingly, I was bigger, but I wasn't fat.
Right.
I wouldn't look at myself and go, oh my God, I'm fat. But I believed I was then.
Especially if you've got siblings, you can be bigger than your sister, but like not big, but just slightly bigger.
Yeah.
But you get that,
stature.
you get that label.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're the big one. So that's something that you become later on.
And that is very true that, and again, just through people that we've worked with, that, they have been given labels by parents, and that parent might be you're the taller one, but they say the bigger one. And you translate that as a kid, oh my God, I'm the big one. And so then
instead
it's like instead of the tall one. And then it kind of goes on. But I remember for me, when I was at school, so I was bullied at school, and I was that kid that you would see in the playground, sort of stood on their own. I hated playtimes. I hated lunch times, because it sort of felt that you were supposed to have this group of friends or a friend, and I didn't. And I remember that there was a period where I did have a friend, and for a short period, and we used to have an ice cream van in our playground at school. And because I was quite lucky that my dad would give us spending money every day when we went to school, and even though we had school lunches, and I would use that to buy like crisps and chocolate and sweets for other kids and this particular friend, because I felt that I wasn't good enough. So I was trying to buy friendship. So my positive intent was, I will eat with these people, buy them treats, because I want to buy friendship, because I don't deserve it. Which is kind of, again, going back to self-medicating with food. And I think that so many people, and again, Kat, you're a great example of this, say, oh my gosh, I'm overweight, I can't lose weight, this is really complicated, it's me, and I'm never going to get to the other side of it. But actually, when you start to pull it apart, when you start to question, what's happened in my life? What was my relationship with food? What was I taught? We can be taught by parents that we've got to clean our plate. And if we're going to get into trouble for not doing so, then, have we ever switched that off? Have we ever questioned that?
I think you make a really good point though. And that's a really good tip for people that are listening or watching, that are in the same situation, which is to look, when did it change, and did it change? So, with Kat, she could identify the point at which things changed, and that's what you need to deal with. So in your case, you could identify that it was when I was at school, when I was trying to impress these people, for example. But identifying at what point did it happen, right? So, how can people do that? Well, looking at photos, for example, of them when they were younger, because like you said, our perception can be distorted by the way that you feel, based on those around you or comparison, and it might not be an accurate representation. Equally, how many times do we hear people say like, oh God, I look back at pictures when I was 10 years younger and I think, oh my God, I looked amazing, and back then I didn't think I did, and I used to think how chubby I was, and I look now and think, God, I wish I looked like that now. So we really do take for granted that it's all about comparison, and we take for granted how good we actually do look. So I think that looking back at photos, if people can kind of identify and pinpoint the time at which that changed, the time at which they put weight on, that can then be a really useful tool to identify, okay, then I know when that change happened. So why did that change happen? And then address that cause.
What was happening in my life right then?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, I remember that when I was at Oxford, I put quite a bit of weight on in my final year of Oxford. Like I was much bigger than I've ever been, before and since. And I know exactly why that was, because I was so at the height of stress with my finals and I was desperate to get a first and I just wanted to get out of there at that point. And I remember for me, I went to food for comfort, right? I was like, I'm here, I'm on my own. I was just focused on my work. And I just thought, eating was kind of like a treat and a reward that I gave myself, right? So I think another thing as well is people that are in highly stressful jobs or have highly stressful lives. Often it can be used as a kind of, well, I deserve it. I deserve that glass of wine because I've had a really stressful day, or I deserve that.
To switch off.
Yes, exactly. And I think if that's the cause, because that's another thing we've not yet mentioned, then looking at, okay, then, so what else can I do to switch off? What else can I reward myself with? So for me, I could have gone, for example, well, I'm really stressed out, I'm going to eat some sweets. Or I could have gone, actually, do you know what? I'm so stressed out, I'm going to close my books and I'm going to go and watch an episode of Breaking Bad. That's what I'm going to do.
To
and
cheer
that's
you
how
up.
I'm switch off. It's such a good show. But do you know what I mean?
Breaking Bad.
So let me ask you
comedy,
then.
yes. Breaking
No,
Bad.
I'm not into comedy that much. I prefer heavy stuff.
So you've just said something there that you said that you put weight on in your final year at Oxford. You know why you did it, but how did you then subsequently lose that? Because you have. So, and you've gone back to how you were before. So what made, how come you didn't carry it on? Because we know a lot of people go, I'm stressed, and turn to food. And then whenever they're stressed, which, we all live stressful lives. And, there's not a day goes by where you can't be stressed about something. So why didn't you carry that on?
I mean, I think that a lot of it was like situational stress, because I don't think I've ever felt the level of stress that I felt in that time. However, I do think a lot of it as well was identifying better coping mechanisms, because when I was there, it was a situation of, I didn't have any moment spare to do anything but revise. So I wasn't even like going out as much. I was getting food ordered in because it was easier. So it's just a case of, I think it was pulling myself out of that situation, sort of a needs must situation, which I think is why I'm mentioning people with work, because I understand with people in a stressful job, that can be something. But I think it's identifying better coping mechanisms, which is something I did, and ways to switch off that don't involve food.
And I'd just like to add to that as well, that I think, again, our listeners, viewers need to appreciate is that when you are sleep deprived, you are going to eat more. And Liv, when you were at uni, you were sleep deprived, you were, and even Hunter, when I know that he sometimes, when he's been really working hard and he's going, oh my God, I'm eating chocolate and I really shouldn't. But it's when you're so tired and that you've expended all your sort of like mental and physical energy, it's a go-to, a natural go-to, I guess, because we feel that we need that boost. So I think that's something that's
I didn't consider that. Actually, that is also true. I think the sleep deprivation was massive, and in that moment, it was kind of like, I'll just have whatever I need to get through, because this is so important. And I think because I could see an end goal of it as well, I knew that it was going to end. I think had it been sort of more of a long-term stress, I would have been more like, okay, I need to look at ways to deal with this. But because I knew it was like a means to an end, and once my exams were over, then I'd be out of that situation. I think that's why as well, I never saw it as a long-term thing. It was in that situation. And then when I came out of it, I just, I lost weight without trying to lose weight because I was no longer in that situation.
I suppose that's like Kath, but you said I was no longer in that situation, so I stopped overeating. Kath was no longer in that situation in her headspace, so stopped overeating. Yeah. But something that you might identify here with Kat, that, and I'm not talking now, I'm talking about when you weren't in a great headspace like myself in the past. And when you have a vice like overeating, and maybe you didn't do this, but I certainly did, and I know a lot of people that do and have done. So, you're in this bad headspace. So you use food for whatever form, whether that be self-punishment, self-medication, as a distraction, as a switch off, as a boost of just something to help you just feel better just for a second. But what actually then happens is you almost start looking for excuses. You start looking for the next catastrophe and tragedy, so you can go, I've had a really bad day, so I'm gonna go and eat some biscuits, and so that you can actually not take responsibility for it. Did you ever find that have that happen to you?
100%. And also every time I failed my diet, I was like, there you go. I'm useless, I'm disgusting, I'm greedy, I'm rubbish. And it was this self-perpetuating cycle of just then eating more food and then feeling bad, and then restriction, and then binging, and then, it was just all fed into each other. It was just messed up, really.
Yeah.
But as soon as I realised my self-worth, like that day, and actually nobody took my value away that day, what happened to me, and I'm worth feeling good. And I think sometimes in the society like we live in, like liking yourself can be seen as a bad thing. It's almost an insult, isn't it? Like, oh, she loves herself. But actually it's a good thing. And I looked at it as how I look after my children. I love my children. I want the best for them. I wouldn't let them eat a whole packet of biscuits before bed because it's just not good for them, is it? So why was I doing it? And I just thought, once I had that switch in my head, it just became easy.
Absolutely love that. What a brilliant analogy and a brilliant concept. Treat yourself like you would your child when it comes to eating food, healthy eating, etc.
And equally, sorry to interrupt, equally, my love for them doesn't change if they're a stone heavier or a stone lighter or what. And we should love ourselves the same, really.
Yeah, and I love that you're absolutely right. And I think that value does come down to, and one thing that I love about, it's sort of been, we've only known each other a year, and it's just because you happened to rock up at one of our workshops. But your journey has been so inspirational, and again, our philosophy has always been, look, nobody chooses to overeat. Overeating is a symptom. So what is the cause? And you're a great example of that. And also I love the fact that you now pay it forward, and that obviously you've become sort of part of our charity, Trauma Research UK, and now you're a mentor for the charity, and you're helping others to learn to love themselves too, which I think is so lovely. And that's a question, actually. So Nick speaks to you, he tells you that what happened doesn't change your value. Was that a switch, or was that a process?
It was a slower switch in that I had to keep reminding myself, because for years, when you've told yourself the same thing over and over again, I did catch myself saying bad things to myself in the mirror. And the way we talk to ourselves is so bad. Like the things I used to say to myself, I would never say to anybody. And I would still catch myself and I go, no, I don't talk to myself like that anymore. So it was a slower process, but eventually it just became a habit that I didn't do that anymore.
I love that. So you're saying now that you're in a position where you don't have to fight with weight. You don't have to fight with that voice in your head that tells you that you're not good enough. You've kind of come out the other side, and life is good.
Definitely, yeah. It just feels like this is how I am now. And I think that's the other thing. I was always saying to myself, it's impossible to lose weight. I can't lose weight. I just have to look at a chocolate bar and I gain half a stone. So if you're saying that to yourself over and over again, I believed it. So I changed what I was saying, and actually I can lose weight. I can feel good. And then that happened.
I mean, that self-dialogue is absolutely paramount in every aspect of life. Self-dialogue is really, we're following our own instructions. So if you are saying, I can't lose weight, then you won't. You've got to believe first.
I think as well, it comes down to one of my favorite topics, as you know, as a bit of a science nerd, which is neuroplasticity, right? So I'll throw in a little bit of science corner right here, which is obviously neuroplasticity just describes the fact that the brain is constantly changing its structure and its function. Throughout our lives, it adapts to the things that we do. So if you start to learn a new instrument, for example, your brain will adjust to create new neurons to learn how to play that instrument. Equally, if you don't touch it for years, then your brain will get rid of those neurons because it will decide you no longer need them. And the reason why this is so important is, like Kat said there, it took a little bit of practice, because she's for years, without even realizing it and not intentionally, practiced derogatory ways of thinking about herself, practiced these sort of negative attitudes, sort of negative self-talk. And it does take a little bit of time to sort of challenge those and create new pathways. And that's basically what you've done. So, every time you catch yourself saying something negative about yourself, saying like, oh, I just can't lose weight, go, I've not managed to lose weight right now, but actually I will in the future.
Absolutely.
And just challenging those thoughts. So, you might slip into them because, Kat practiced it for years, those thoughts. And that's the way that she'd sort of started to lay down those neural pathways in the brain. But forcing herself to challenge herself and go, actually, no, you know what? I am going to do it this time. Or I am, challenging things. I am looking at things differently. I do love myself. I do deserve to, to lose weight. And just challenging those things, which can really start to shift the brain, and over time, create new neural pathways, get rid of the old ones, and shift perspective.
And one of the things that she definitely changed, which she said today, was instead of saying I'll be happy when, saying I'll be happy now. And that shifts everything, because saying I'll be happy when, there's always something that's external that you're waiting to happen to change that feeling inside you. But when you realize that everything starts with a thought, it starts and ends with everything that we do, you can make that decision to say, I'm going to be happy now. And when you make that decision, you can then look for reasons why you can be happy. And they're all in front of all of us, right? There's plenty of reasons in front of all of us as to why we can be happy. And then doing something that we're taught not to do, which, as you said, loving yourself, she's full of herself, she really loves herself. Well, if that doesn't start with you, what hope have you got? You've got to be your biggest self-promoter, because if we're not doing it for ourselves, then who's doing it for us? And so what a massive shift. I mean, incredible. Yeah. And it's no wonder that the 70 pounds that you've lost, you didn't have to think about it, because what you've done, you've changed how you look at the world.
Which is great. And I love the photographs. I know you brought some photographs for us that Liv has there. So anybody our viewers that are watching on YouTube will be able to see your before and after photos. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously the one on the left there is your before, and that's lovely Kat today. What are you holding in that? Is that a cocktail by any chance?
It's a mocktail, actually.
Okay, okay. I'm glad you cleared that up.
In that.
You do. You look really beautiful.
But it's really lovely that people are saying that. But the biggest before and after for me is in my mind, and I wish I could show people that.
That's such a nice thing to say, but it's absolutely true, because that is where it starts. It all starts in your mind.
And one thing that we didn't pre-warn you about, so I'm sorry to put this bit of pressure on you, but we have this kind of, before we let any of our guests go, we're creating through our podcast this metaphorical handbook to happiness. And today's page is about why diets don't work, and it's all down to sort of realistically your thoughts, etc., around yourself and your relationship with food and where you learned that. So our question to you, Kat, is if you were to add some words of wisdom onto this page of our metaphorical handbook to happiness, do you have anything to share?
I could fill the whole page. I just want people to know that they deserve to feel good and amazing and well, and to believe that they can do it. And if I can lose weight, then anybody can. Trust me, I tried for so long. So I just think, so it all begins with self-love. Don't try and hate yourself into a version of yourself that you can love, because it won't work.
No, you're never going to hate yourself healthy, are you, I guess? Hating yourself healthy is not a possibility. So I think you've got to start with loving yourself. And I think that's a great tip. And then before we do let you go, we would like to invite you to our masterclass as well. So we have a weight loss masterclass coming up, and we would love for you to be there as our guest to inspire all our attendees and sort of share your journey with them as well.
Thank you. I'd love to come.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add to Kat?
Just massive thanks, and I see, I remember that day when we first spoke, and you've transformed. You're just such a different person.
Like little angel as well, isn't she?
Yeah, but all the time, you're just smiling all the time. And here's the thing: if we turn the clock back to that day, so let's say when we spoke at the workshop, if I would have said, right, today we're doing a podcast, will you come and join us? What would you have said?
Not in a million years. Not in a million. It was so hard to find a photo of myself before, because I don't have photos of myself. Really? So doing something like this would have been a no.
Yeah. Well, we're so grateful to you, Kat. We're so grateful for the fact that you do inspire, that you are just such a lovely, lovely person, that you do through the charity, through Trauma Research UK, helping more people to feel better and good about themselves, and just for sort of sprinkling your little sparkle, because you are like this. She's like Tinkerbell, isn't she? She sort of like sprinkles this little sort of joy, happiness, and light wherever she goes. Thank you so very much for joining us, Kat. Hunter, you were listening to Kat talking about her journey with weight loss there. What did you sort of take from that conversation?
I think it's just really interesting how when people are trying to lose weight, they become food obsessed and constantly watching what they're eating and counting the calories. But in the end, you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, because you're so obsessed that it's always in your mind that it makes it even harder to control what you're eating. It's kind of like, say with alcoholism as well, when people go, I've not drank now for like 92 days, whatever. And it's like they constantly kind of remind themselves how long it's been since they drank. And it's an amazing achievement, but equally, it's kind of like constantly reminding yourself of the thing that you're trying to avoid. It just kind of makes it
focus.
harder, doesn't it? Exactly.
It's interesting that you bring alcoholism up because people feel bad that they're an addict.
Yeah.
And I think anyone feels bad if they feel they're an addict. But would that change things for people if they, instead of saying, I want to lose weight, they said, I'm addicted to food and I need to do something about it?
Not sure. But I very much, and I've said that, and I don't know if I heard this somewhere or if it's my own, I'm going to take full credit. But whatever you resist persists. And that's what we're saying. If you're on a diet, you become food obsessed. If you think, I can't have that, it's all you think about. And so it's better to not say, I'm never going to have, I'm not having, just not right now. And I know that our way of eating is very much that we eat healthily through the week. And then at weekends, if we want something like cake, whatever, then we'll have it. And
that's true. But don't forget either that dieting is not a piece of cake.
Set them up for that. Honestly, I blame you both.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on.
No, but what you said there, I mean, you said you might have stole it, that whatever you resist persists.
I'm not sure though.
Whether you did or didn't, it's factual. And I'm going to give you a little bit of science corner for that one, which I just find really fascinating, which is basically, I was reading into kind of this idea of what is termed in psychology, deprivation mindset, which is that whenever we are deprived, or whether that's, self-deprivation or whatever it might be, as in terms of, we say we're going on a diet, whenever we are deprived of basic instinct, so food, love, those sorts of things, our body goes into an emergency mode. It thinks that we are, in danger. And as a result of that, we do start to obsess about the thing that we feel we need. And not only do we obsess about it, but actually we find that we get, anxious, agitated. So even when you're in that situation of dieting, your mental health is really poor as well. And that makes it even worse because, Kat mentioned the importance of loving yourself so that you feel you deserve to lose weight, etc. And how can you do that when you feel so frustrated with yourself because you're obsessing over something and getting angry and agitated, because naturally you're putting yourself into a deprivation mindset.
Yeah.
And really interesting research study that I read with I can't remember if it was rats or mice, but with rodents, where they basically deprived them of either food or water for a short period of time, and then when they return that food or water to their cage, they find that they effectively overeat. They saturate themselves with it because it's this desperation of becoming so obsessed with it. And I think that's what so many people do, and what Kat said she did. They say, right, that's it, I'm not having sugar, I'm not having chocolate, whatever it might be. You deprive yourself of something, so then your body goes into that emergency mode where you feel like, I really want it, and you start to obsess over it.
Makes
you get
sense.
angry and agitated, and then when you go, you slip off the wagon, so to speak. People say like, I've heard really recently in therapy, someone said to me, whenever I have a slip, I have a slide. And I thought that was such an interesting
I always thought it was a fall.
Yeah, no, she said, whenever I have a
like
slip,
that.
I have a slide. And we sort of went into that and what she meant by that. But ultimately, that's what she was saying. She couldn't just go on, then I'll have a chocolate, whatever. She'd go, I'll have a chocolate, that's it then.
Yeah.
She'd eat all the chocolate she could find.
Oh.
And that's what that is.
Yeah,
right?
well, Hunter had a slip yesterday that turned into a slide. Do you
Yeah, I
remember?
did.
It's funny because we do it, and Hunter obviously has got no weight issues. He's got no issues around food. He's actually probably of all of us probably the healthiest in regards, like your mindset is very much about nourishing your body. But yeah, yesterday I was like, do you want me to make you a tuna melt sandwich? And you went, well, I might as well because I had a piece of Galaxy, so I'm on the
No,
slippery
it
slope.
wasn't just a piece of Galaxy. It was the whole bar. It was the whole thing. So
That's
But I think there's an element, there's an element of human nature
Of
that,
course.
of course we do that. But I think it's when it becomes trying to punish yourself, or when it becomes, what's the point? And it goes into that dangerous territory that it is affecting our mental health. Because like Kat said, then, we then feel again the next day, like we have to go back into deprivation, and we deprive ourselves more because we feel like, oh my God, I had that and I shouldn't have had it.
And beat
it's
ourselves
just a vicious
up.
cycle.
So
Yes,
I think the
exactly.
identification is, are you in control of food or does food control you? So for example, you get a packet of biscuits, can you eat 1 or 2 biscuits and then put it back? Can you get a chocolate bar, eat 1 or 2 pieces and put it back? If you can do that, you're in control of the food. If you can't, the food might be in control
Absolutely.
of you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what I did, knowing that we were talking about what else today, I had it was a little while ago that I wrote, that we wrote our book.
See
It was a
that?
slip of
That's
the tongue.
taking
Wow.
credit for
Freudian
everything
slip
I
just
wrote.
there.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, was that a Freudian slip?
No, it was a little-
I seem to notice that my And I'm on the front cover of that book. And
Okay.
my name is mentioned before yours, so I'm not saying anything.
But when we wrote Winning at Weight Loss,
Yes.
I did a lot of research through all our client files, people that we'd
You
helped
did do that.
successfully. And so what I did for today's episode was I just made some bullet points of causes of being overweight, struggling to lose weight, overeating, obsessing about food, yo-yo dieting, binge eating, and some of those causes, and we've discussed quite a few in the episode, but just wanted to point out to our listeners some of those things so that you can start to unpick it and consider your journey. So trauma, as with Kat, we mentioned protection. She wanted to be big to protect herself, self-harm, self-medication because she blamed herself. It can also be a commonality. A lot of people, if they have a parent who overeats, will also overeat to give give them both a commonality and something.
And can I just
in
mention
common.
something very quickly there?
Yeah,
and
sure.
carry on. I mentioned earlier in this episode, and it's just one thing that I've been thinking to mention, that if people can look at photos and look through their life and go, oh, when did it change? When did I become big? And one thing I didn't say, and I should have said at that point, is that I did think after that some people might say, well, I've always been big. Even when I look at photos, I was big as a child, for example. So then what's different in that case, it comes down to, okay, then so what was going on at home? i.e., was it that the parents also had the attitude? Was it that you needed protecting in the home? Was it that you had a clean plate policy at home where you were taught to, you have to clear your plate? Very interestingly, someone I worked with literally just this week who said to me that she was brought up by her grandma, and she said, I don't know what it is, but my grandma was horrific if I didn't clear my plate. And it all came down to the fact that her grandma was alive during the war and food was rationed, and therefore she had this big thing about the fact you must eat every bit of food because we have to be grateful for this.
And there you go,
And that's where it came
scarcity.
from.
Yeah, and I also
Scarcity's on
remember
my
someone
list.
that we worked with quite a few years ago, which is the total opposite of what Kat said. Kat said, obviously, if, I love my kids, so I'm not going to make my kids overeat because that would be wrong. Where someone who actually wanted sweets and things that much because she was on a binge would wake her children up and give them sweets so she didn't feel as bad eating them herself.
But that and that's scarcity, by the way, that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
That's one of the
rationed.
things on our list.
Or if you've come from a poor household
Exactly.
where there's a lot
Yes.
of people in the household.
Exactly.
And therefore food is...
And you
is-
feel like now I can afford to buy the food myself.
Yeah.
So, and it's just available, which I remember, people come to us in there's all sorts of places and asking for our help. And I do remember a lady, we were getting a ferry. We were actually filming something. We were getting a hovercraft, actually. It wasn't a ferry. And I remember a lady coming up to both of us and saying that she binge eats on chocolate, on biscuits it was. And again, there was a cause behind that. And I think hers was scarcity from memory, that she'd grown
She was
up in a-
homeless at one point.
Correct. And that was where that came from.
Did you say you got a hovercraft?
We did.
Yeah,
Where
we've
were you?
been on
Back
a
to the Future
hovercraft.
too?
Yeah. No, a hovercraft. It's a
They
real
do
thing. It's on
exist.
water. It blows up
You've
and then
been on one, I think.
No, she had. Has she?
Is that not what Marty McFly had?
No.
That's a hoverboard.
Are they not real?
No, they're not real.
Yeah, he turned
Yet.
into something
Yeah.
completely
That's, I
different.
was seeing you both on hoverboards, so
Yeah.
I was quite
No.
excited.
No, we haven't.
Okay.
It was a hovercraft, which is a boaty type thing.
And that's real, but
And that is
hoverboards,
real.
not-
Yeah,
that is
not,
real.
Not around just yet.
You're not
Which
right.
is
Well, maybe.
Okay.
disappointing because Back to the Future is now in the past.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, they should
It
be
is.
here.
That's true in the
Someone
past.
needs to get them on the market soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, go on.
Substitute for love is another thing that we noticed there. So, if you don't feel that you're loved enough, then obviously we know that food releases feel-good hormones. So it can give you that brief respite from feeling that way. Heartbreak, grief, having been bullied, and then unconsciously then starting to bully yourself by, like Kat mentioned, sort of negative self-talk, and then to
You
try and
take over where the bully's left off.
Absolutely. And then two other things that we must sort of put into the equation here: sleep deprivation, which we've touched on, but also hormones. Hormones have a very big impact on us, both on our mood and how we eat, etc. So menopause, during sort of periods, when you're having your period, etc., that can all have an effect on your eating. So these are all
Potential causes. So
And
let's share some tips.
Let's share some tips for our Handbook to Happiness, everybody. So whatever you can think of on our Handbook to Happiness before we wrap up, what we put in as tips on this page.
Well, I'll start with the tips, right? So obviously the first tip is everything starts with a thought, and I want you to consider that. So if you change your thoughts, you can change your habits. So what was that thought that made you put weight on in the first place? That's critical, and usually there's some underlying trauma behind that. And then the second thing is to complete a food diary. Again, because of a previous trauma, a lot of us eat unconsciously. So actually writing down everything that you eat and seeing it in black and white will make a difference. And having that will, there's many reasons why food diary is important. Firstly, to see what you're eating, but secondly, to then look at substitutes, because changing habits and food from one thing to another is very, very difficult. So you've got to make individual changes, and you can look at your food diary and go, okay, I can change that. I can get something with less calories in that, which will taste the same, but I won't have the same effect on
And I
me.
think that's a really good point, because we've spoke so much in this episode about the problems of restriction,
Yeah.
and whether that's be because, you know, you had a poor upbringing and you didn't have access to food, whether that be because, you know, you've dieted, whether that be because, you know, there's competition for food, you know, when you were younger, all these different things that we've talked about. But ultimately, it all comes down to when you restrict, you crave, you obsess, and you feel agitated and angry. So the reason why that food diary is so important is, rather than restrict, because people might be thinking, well, you know, how do I get around that then? Because I want to lose weight, but I don't want to restrict to make it worse. The food diary is the answer to that, right? Because what they can then do is make a list of everything that they eat day to day, and not to judge. Don't be embarrassed by that. This is a really key tool. As you would normally eat, write everything down, and then find healthier substitutions little bit by bit to those things. Then you're never restricting. You're not going, no, I can't have that. No, I can't have this.
Substitution is not restriction.
Exactly. And you can do it little bit by bit.
Yeah.
So just go, okay, what's a healthier version of that? What's a healthier version of that? I mean, I know we spoke recently about a lady that mentioned to us that she used to, when she did the food diary, she was eating a lot of ice cream in the evenings. Didn't even realize she was doing it. She was kind of doing it unconsciously. And she said, right, how can I make that better? So she started to switch to like little mousses that she'd put in the freezer, a lot less calories, also a lot smaller portions, just little things like that. You're not restricting yourself.
Yeah.
You're not saying I can't. You're just looking for a better solution.
Yeah.
So then naturally it just is so much easier, and you enjoy it. You're not feeling, oh, you know, so-and-so's going out there, but I can't go because there's nothing I can eat. I can't do that.
But,
You're still doing those things.
And the food diary allows you to eat consciously, because you're now looking at everything that you're going to eat, and because you've got to write it down. And when you consciously eat things, you can consciously deduct things from what you're going to eat, which obviously is also important.
So Hunter, do you have anything to add? As I know that you're super fit, super healthy
Yes.
eater, so you've never really, other than your little blips with your Galaxy bar, but we'll let you off. And I do know when you're studying as well, understandably, you're sort of sleep deprived, etc. But do you have anything that you'd like to add to this page of our Handbook to Happiness?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, really, it's not just about substituting as well and restricting yourself, but also if you can get to the place where you're like, I'm so full, I don't really want to eat anymore anyway. And the best ways of doing that is high protein, because high protein reduces hormones like ghrelin, which make you feel hungry. So if you have higher protein, you're less likely, you feel more satiated. So then you're less likely to want to eat something sweet or something that's higher in calories, really, because it helps. Like, it's normally lower in calories too. And then also fiber, so fruit and veg, really, because it also does the same kind of thing, which you feel fuller for longer.
Amazing.
And that can help by just drinking, just being hydrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Hydration is also important. So my final little tips for our Handbook to Happiness to help you with your weight loss journey, in addition to what everybody else has shared here, and writing a timeline to start to look at maybe traumas in your life that you didn't even appreciate had an effect on you and your weight. But little things, you know, little changes you can make. So, you know, don't eat after 8 o'clock at night. Do eat consciously, put your knife and fork down between every mouthful. The longer you take to eat, the quicker you'll feel full. So that's a good tip. As having realistic goals. You know, I think a lot of people go, right, that's it, I'm going to stop eating, I want to be this size. You know, small chunks, just, and maybe don't make it about weight. Maybe don't make it about inch loss. Just make it about, I'm going to be healthy for today, and I'm going to have a healthier day. So that's another example.
Eating healthier rather than saying I'm not eating is such a better phrasing.
Yeah, and I've adapted the way that I cook at home. In that now I love cake. You know, like cake is just good. But I eat cake, but I make it really well. I make it gluten free, and as Hunter said there, I make it higher protein. So I will use ground almonds instead of flour. I tend not to use sugar. I will use a sugar replacement from a natural source such as stevia, and I make some really good, delicious treats. If you move more, that is, you don't have to go to a gym, you don't have to go jogging, but just moving more, get a bit of music on with your Hoover or a mop. Not just the mop. I mean, I do mean not mop the floor at the same time, not just sort of dancing around with the mop, but moving more really helps. Instead of frying, try an air fryer. So just small adjustments. And the last thing I'm going to say is don't do it all at once. Just start with one little step at a time. And when it becomes a habit, bring in the next
so
one
important
as well. So just, don't rush into it. If you want more details about, our philosophy, our approach to weight loss, and you'd like some details about our weight loss masterclass, just drop us an email, events@speakman.tv. Do give us a follow on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. We're at the Speakmans, and on YouTube. If you're just listening to this and you want to watch this episode and you want to see Kat's amazing before and after pictures, then this is Handbook to Happiness pod. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please listen to more. Do give us a like and subscribe. If you've got any questions, drop us an email. And thank you for joining us for our weight loss episode of our podcast of Handbook to Happiness.
Thanks so much for joining us. Wherever you're listening to this podcast today, do be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and we'd be incredibly grateful of a 5-star review.
Oh, and don't forget to recommend our podcast to your family and friends.
And if you'd like to have a look at some more free resources, take a look at our website, nickandeva.com.
If you want to drop us a question, we'd love to hear from you. Send it to admin@speakman.tv.
And you can follow us. We're at the Speakmans on all social media platforms. On YouTube, we're Handbook to Happiness pod. If you are struggling, do be sure to speak to your general practitioner. And all that's left to say is that we appreciate you spending time with us today.